This program is a presentation of UCTV for educational and non-commercial use only.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Roger Sippl is a serial entrepreneur and really was one and has been one of the key innovators in enterprise software. His first company was Informix, which he ran as CEO and took public, and again, one of the most successful companies of its time. And after that, Roger funded and started two more companies. And he is now a private venture capital investor. Roger, thank you very much for joining us and for coming back to Berkeley.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming to the talk today. So I'm going to try to say a few words about entrepreneuring and how to do it. So back in the old days, and I am very old, so I went to school here from 74 to 77. So it was a pretty easy formula. Go to a big college. So I got that part done. Get some sort of impressive degree, have a smart idea. That's pretty much all you needed in the early days of the software industry. I mean, there weren't very many software companies or software products. So if you could figure out what those programmers were talking about, and you were a business person, you know how to run a lemonade stand, you could build something, you could start a company, you were pretty much golden as long as you knew how to execute. But it didn't take too long before Bill Gates' picture was on the cover of Fortune magazine and sort of spoiled it for everybody. The word was out, you can make a lot of money in software. So nowadays it takes a true invention in addition to a whole lot of other things. And you probably know all this, but I'm just going to sort of set the stage. It takes, technical innovation. You got to maybe even invent a new marketing model too. Got to position it well versus your competition, get it financed, have a great team, you got to execute, you got to survive. You got to get public or get bought, which in the last few years has been pretty hard to do. We're hoping that gets better by the time you folks get your companies going. Or maybe run a sustainable business forever, which has not been the model of the serial entrepreneur here on the stage. Sometimes I wish it was, and I'll talk about that a little bit. And I'd love to see that from some of you folks out there, build the next great sustaining company that just grows and grows and grows and employs lots of great people doing great things. So there's lots of examples of how to build a great company, most of which I don't know very much about, like web search engines, PC hardware, wireless networking, cell phone systems. I know like a little bit about each of those things. But the examples from my life is what I'm going to talk about because I know a whole bunch more about those. The relational database, the applications of the enterprise software era, and the application server itself, which actually came a little bit after that. Now, what I didn't realize when I started Informix, when I was a student at Berkeley certainly, was that companies are a lot more about people than they are about even the technology and the markets. And I'll try to touch on that because I don't think that comes through very much. And I don't really know, I never went and got an MBA, so I don't know what they teach over at the Haas School in terms of dealing with people or evaluating people. Or I'm sure there's organizational behavior classes and stuff like that. But there's a lot more about people in these businesses than there is about anything else. So I don't know what that exactly means for you, but other than to develop your people skills more than you might have thought before you heard the talk today. And stories are probably the best way to explain the elements I want to try to get across today about invention, funding, people, leadership, and execution. So I'll begin with all of these self-centered stories. So I did, yes, indeed, go to a big college. I got a nice computer science degree. I went, and doing that was not straightforward. I'll explain to the end, because I'm sure as you're all starting companies, trying to be entrepreneurs, you're all facing other challenges as well, indeed, probably while you're going to school. And so I just want you to know you're not alone. There are a lot of challenges in life. But I'll explain that toward the end. But my first job was actually at Bechtel Engineering over in San Francisco, which I think our hall is named after Stephen Bechtel. So thank you, Stephen, for donating the money for the hall. And my job was to build a lot of reports off of a database. Did anybody ever see the movie The China Syndrome? Jane Fonda movie, a long time ago? Oh, too bad. There's this nuclear reactor. The theory was, you know, if it gets a crack and all the water leaks out, then the core overheats and it melts down and goes to China, right? It just goes through right through the center of the Earth, comes out on the other side of the Earth. Well, in the movie, you know, of course, it happens, right? The pump cracks and the water comes out and it starts overheating. So they go to the printout to find all the parts because they're supposed to try to find the X-ray for the parts and figure out how to fix it. Well, those were the reports that I worked at Bechtel because they were building these 21 nuclear power plants all over the world. And little did I know, I had to produce these reports because the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was going to shut down all these construction projects if they couldn't prove that they could retrieve these construction drawings from the vaults. And these reports were explaining what drawer of what vault the design drawings were in. So that was an exciting little job while I was still trying to finish my bachelor's degree. Especially it was hard because the report writer was terrible, because the data model in the database system, which was a primitive database system, was terrible. So I thought I could do a better job. After sweating bullets and finally finishing this project and finally graduating from college, I had some ideas for building a better database system. So I went and interviewed at Apple, and Steve Jobs turned me down because I wore a tie to the interview and a few other little problems. Well, all right, I'll tell you. So he asked me if I know 6502 assembly language, which was the assembly language of the chip he happened to pick for the Apple II, right? You know, one assembly language is pretty much the same as the next, right? Move byte from here to there. I mean, how hard is it, right? So I go, well, you know, I went to Berkeley, so I got a degree in computer science, and they make you take assembly language class, and you've seen them all. So I can learn 6502. So move on. You know, what's your next question? That's not an issue. And he goes, don't wave your degree at me. And I went, ooh. Didn't realize he dropped out of school. Okay, fine. Still kind of bugging him. So that's strike two. And then he goes, well, what do you want to do here at Apple? I go, well, I think these microcomputers are going to run just lots of different software programs that are going to be used in businesses for all sorts of business purposes, not just word processor replacements, which was the #1 thing then. The spreadsheet hadn't been invented yet. And he goes, well, that's it. You know, interview's over because we're all about home computing here, personal computing, so forget it. You know, take your tie and hit the road. So that was it, end of that interview. But I went to work for his competitor, which a company that doesn't exist anymore, but they were building one of the first microcomputers before the IBM PC. And Harry Garland and Roger Melling, just great people. They basically gave me an office and a project and treated me like a graduate student. Just said, you want to build some database stuff? Here you go. We'll check back with you in 6 months, you know, try to do good things. So I designed this relational database system in a report writer and query language and screen builder and application programmer interface and design documents, lots of the King's English, about that high. And eventually, when their hardware was late that was going to run this database system, they let me license these designs and start a company to do this sort of stuff. So for all you computer scientists in the room, this probably, hopefully, looks fairly familiar. It's the relational databases. You can take tables of data and you can select which records you want and which columns you want. You can project out just the columns you want, and you can join two tables together and get another table. That was really very flexible at the time. That was not only much more flexible than the other stuff that I almost killed myself trying to do all those reports for Bechtel, but it was considered unbuildable by some. It was going to bring computers to their knees. Now, the microcomputer I was going to try to make this run on, I had a 64K memory. I mean, I have to double check myself every time I say that because it sounds ludicrous. But the processor could only address 64 kilobytes. We had a 10 megabyte hard disk toward the end of my career there. But we were, at Krememco, about to come out with this Motorola 68000 based super microcomputer that would support like 8 users. But their product was delayed, so I left and I started a company to build this for all of the Unix machines that were going to run on these generic processors. And son of a gun, if both of those things didn't happen, so who made money on the relational model here? Well, Larry Ellison did. I did, but not nearly as much as Mr. Ellison. Bob Epstein, Mike Stonebreaker, a couple of Cal guys. And IBM made a lot of money. Ted Codd, who actually invented the relational model. So I wrote all these design documents, and I thought, gee, I've invented this great thing. I don't know what it's called. And then I read all of Ted Codd's papers. So it was like in 78 and 79, I wrote my design documents. Codd's papers were in, I think it was really like 70, 71. The Computer History Museum brought us all back a couple years ago. It was really nice. They called me up and they go, we'd like to get all you relational database pioneers together to take your oral history while you're still with us. I'm thinking, okay, good. I am a dinosaur. They're putting me in a museum now before I die. But some of the guys from IBM actually were like 20 years older than I was, so it probably was a pretty good idea that they did it. So they got a bunch of guys from IBM, big room, big table, like 20 guys sitting around the table, right? And, you know, Epstein and all the guys from IBM and some guys from Oracle and some of the Ingres guys. So they went around the room and they said, well, when Ted came up with his original paper, which I think they said he wrote in 69, but no one could understand that one. The one he wrote in like 71, like one guy understood, and that was Chris Dayton. He wrote books about it. Then everyone understood what he was talking about. They went around the room and they said, well, what was your research topic in 1969? So it's coming around to me and I'm thinking, well, see, I was in the 9th grade. So yeah, my research topic was cars and girls, but mostly cars at the time. All right, starting Informix. Now, a lot of you with your business issues thinking, how are we going to get this funded? So that was my issue, because they said, look, we'll give you rights to all these documents you wrote, and you can build whatever software you want with them, just give us the first OEM deal. I go, okay, cool. Great, I got these documents, I spent 2 years writing them, I know it's the right stuff, and now that I've read Ted's papers, it's actually got a name, it's called the relational model. So I started Relational Database Systems, Inc., soon to be called Informix. But I had no money, and so I did have an ex-girlfriend, and she had money, because her dad, when he was in the Navy, he had invested in American Research and Development, which was America's first venture capital company, which was a public company, and Digital Equipment went public as a dividend. So it was spun off as a dividend from ARD, and that's how they went public. So she had 0 basis shares in Digital Equipment. So I thought, well, maybe I can con her out of like 10% of her net worth. And so I sold her 10% of Informix for 20 grand. I thought that was a pretty good deal, because like instantly, I've got $180,000 worth of stock. I mean, you know, seemed fair to me. Later, when the company was worth like $1 billion, unfortunately, she didn't have all those shares then, because when we, well, it took a lot of talking. So I had to take her to the hot tubs, you know, and those were fairly new back then. I had to take her to Marie Callender's. I had to buy her pumpkin pie. She wanted whipped cream on it. But we do now have 3 kids. And see, aren't they cute? We don't have all that Informix stock anymore, though, because when it went public, we were still broke. Then we were young and married and broke, except for the little money she had. So when it went public, we started selling the same number of shares every quarter. I'll get to that in a minute. But you want to do that because you want to announce earnings. And if you want to get some cash for all your hard work, you sell like 50,000 shares every quarter, right? No matter what, whether the stock's up or down or sideways. That way no one can ever accuse you of inside trading, which you're probably hearing about on the radio today and have been hearing about for a long time. But there's new flare-up. Every year or two, there's some other fool that thinks they can do insider trading and get away with it. But anyway, the 20 grand didn't go too far. So back to 1980. I was putting payroll on the Visa card. We did sell a copy. I went to the Spring Joint Computer Conference, which was before Comdex, which is now defunct, so none of you ever heard of any of these things. But it was like, that's how you sold stuff. You went to these big sales conventions. And I sold a copy of Informix for 5 grand to this, to run on an Onyx super microcomputer. The computer only costs like 10 or 12 grand, so I thought that was pretty good. And I won 10 grand playing Blackjack. So I was able to pay off the Visa. And like headroom, man, I can like hire again, you know, because I could put their paychecks on the Visa again. Never got any VC money. Ran up and down Sand Hill Road till I was blue in the face. I must have made 20 presentations from 80 to 83. Not a dime, no sale. It would either be, well, I hear the relational model is going to flop, it's impossible to build, it brings a mainframe to its knees. And then there was the, well, I hear the relational database is going to be a big hit, and this would be like the next meeting. But you're too late. You know, Oracle started in '77, it's already 1982. And Ingress got funded in 1980, and now Sybase didn't get funded until 1984, mind you. So there's definitely something wrong with my pitch or something. Could have been, the one problem was I was 24 when I tried to start the company, which is a burden a lot of you suffer from. So I don't know. It was tough. I really got, I had one OEM, Altos, who sold that product like nobody's business. Like 30% of the machines they sold had my database system on it. And I had to give them like a steep discount because I couldn't get any venture funding. So I'd like do a $300,000 deal with them where they'd get copies for like, instead of $5,000, they'd get them for like, you know, $600 or something like that. Give them this really steep discount. But I get this $300,000 in one lump. So I could make payroll some more. So anyway, we got cash flow positive. And because of the work of a lot of really great people that did it mostly for sweat equity, mostly for stock options and very low subsistence salary. And we were working 14 hours, I mean literally, and we had t-shirts, you know, high on stress, and we thought that was funny. And we thought we were on a mission from God, which we were. We were going to liberate the world from really lousy databases, and we did. And we were the best database system for the Unix operating system, and the Unix operating system really took off. So we sold whatever we could sell to whoever we could sell it. We sold it to dealers, we sold it to people building applications on top of databases, we sold it to OEMs, we sold it to end users. But we were the best system for Unix, so that was our focus. And that focus saved us, really. Laura King, who was one of my co-founders, she actually had no bachelor's degree when we started the company. She was sort of the VP of marketing, among a lot of other things. Rory Harrington sort of saved the company because he was the genius, bearded wonder type guy, who, after he came to work for us, and he had the decency to bring money with him. I thought that was nice. I said, Roy, I'd like to hire you, but I can't afford you. He goes, oh, okay, it's all right. I inherited a bunch of money, but I want to buy some stock. Ooh, twist my arm. So that really helped a lot. Bob McDonald, Mark Hanson, they were our sales and marketing guys. I had a CFO who was my roommate when I started the company, and he was an accountant, so we incorporated it on the kitchen table in proper Silicon Valley fashion. But a year or two into it, he started like, you know, sort of writing checks to his own Visa card, and then like when the checks came back from the bank, he would like burn them. And then he would go get some old Kinko's receipts, and he would erase the amount of money and write it out and make it look like it was that check and duplicate it, but put some other date and stuff like that. Anyway, when we were trying to be cash flow positive, he was actually stealing. Like, he stole like $300,000 over like 2 years. It was really bad. And he was an usher in my wedding. So my wife's best friend was a lawyer. So we needed to give the cops a picture of Ron for them to go arrest him. So we gave him a picture of him dancing with my wife's best friend. And Maggie's still mad at me about that. So we sued him when we got him to jail. And it was really good because his lawyer is he's not confessing, hey, I didn't do it. What money? You know, do you have any accomplices? Are these people still working for us? Well, I don't know what you're talking about. So his lawyer said that he owned 5% of the company, or 3 or 5 or something, you know, on a big stock option that had like vested. So his lawyer's going, well, we'll give you like a third of the stock back if you tell the cops that you're dropping charges. I thought, well, what does that mean? I mean, he's like stole a lot of money. If he'd have gone into a 7-Eleven and said stick him up with a gun, I mean, this is not like drop charges. The DA prosecutes, and I mean, so I still don't understand that to this day. But anyway, my lawyer calls me up and says, well, before that we had a board meeting. There was an ad campaign there. Use a gun, go to jail. I don't know if you ever heard that little slogan. So we had a board meeting where we decided we're not going to tell the DA to drop nothing, you know. So we adopted the use a checkbook, go to jail philosophy. But then, fortunately, when we were explaining this to his lawyer, he goes, well, all right, be that way. You know, we're not going to tell you anything. Then my lawyer calls up and says, well, you can call Ron back and tell him that we're not going to take any of his options back because I just rescinded them all. I go, well, that's a good trick. How'd you do that? He goes, well, I wrote the stock option agreement. It says right here, in exchange for diligent performance of your duty as chief financial officer, you get these options. And I don't call stealing money diligent performance of your duty. So I just told them they're all gone. And that actually worked. So, so that was fun and games. In 1986, we actually took the company public. We built it up to a $20 million a year revenue rate. Our total expenses, software, hardware, Tupperware, employees, everything was $16 million. So we were at a 20% pre-tax profit margin. We were doubling in size. We had gone from 5 million to 10 million to 20 million. We were forecasting a $40 million year, which indeed we actually did. On that, we went public. The total market cap for the company at the time we did that was $54 million. That's the valuation we got. That's it. 10 years later, that would have probably been 540 million. So timing matters. I mean, even, sure, timing your product matters, timing it versus your competition, but the markets, I had no idea. I mean, of course, we go public, and I start selling, you know, a few % of my holdings every quarter because I'm just so damn happy I'm a millionaire. And I want some money. You know, I wanted to buy a bigger house. I wanted to get a new car. So I started selling this stock, even though it like became worth $1 billion later, but too late. I'd sold like most of my stock. But during the bubble, that would have probably been $1 billion or $2 billion. But it worked out. On the IPO roadshow, though, I got to tell this story. So I'm in New York, and I'm still young. Like, you know, it was 6 years later, so I'm like 29 or something, trying to take this company public. And Larry Ellison's out there, just happens to be in New York at the time, giving an interview to the New York Times, trying to screw up my roadshow. So he goes, oh yeah, Informix, I'm glad you asked. Yes, we're in the process of removing the oxygen they breathe. Isn't that a good line? He's got a bunch of them. He is a funny guy. I didn't really realize he was that funny, but he is. He's got a pretty good sense of humor. There's a couple I can't say with the camera pointed at me, but he's got some funny ones. So Laura, let's go back to her, the no degree thing. So she was always worried about this. And I kept telling her, you are a great VP of marketing. Now, the actual truth is she could have been VP of anything because she was just great at people, okay? And not important people. I mean, it's not like she knew people, like she had a Rolodex of really important people. Nowhere near. But she just knew people, good and bad people, how to deal with good people, how to deal with mediocre people, how to get mediocre people to do great things, how to get a team to perform. She could just do all this stuff. And I didn't know what it was about her, but I always told her that. I said, you know, you could manage anything. You know, but she always felt that, you know, she had this sort of inferiority complex that always bugged her. I think it was shortly after the IPO, she resigned. She raised 3 boys. And then after that, when she's in her late 40s, went back to school, finished her bachelor's degree, and got a PhD in counseling psychology at Stanford. So I was right all along. I mean, she's just great at people. And I just want to point that out because you need people in your organization that are great at people. I mean, it's good if everyone's great at people, but you definitely need some to come in and tell you, by the way, this person is a little weird and no one likes them and no one's getting along with them and it's totally dysfunctional and I don't care how smart they are or where they got their degree from, you got to deal with this. You need that person. I'm just telling you, you got to. Mark Hanson went on to be a senior executive at Sippl. He's a big private equity guy now. Rory Harrington, the bearded wonder, the guy who rewrote all my code in about 3 weeks and didn't tell me for about 2 years. So after I left Informix, I was CEO for 10 years, and I hired badly, but I hired a guy who went on and built it even a lot bigger. Roy retired to a life of fine art, black and white photography. So that's what he does now. And he told me at the time he was leaving Informix after I'd left, he goes, I am so burnt out. I don't want to write any more code again, ever. I'm never writing another line of computer programming. I go, well, that's kind of extreme. You were an MIT Multics programming. You were born to do this. He goes, I can't. Nope, never, again. I go, okay, fine. So www.harrington.com. You got to check this out. I mean, stuff is really good, but you know, it's really simplistic. This didn't render that well when I scanned it in, but if you go to his website, you'll see a little better. He does art shows and stuff. He's got like 500,000 hits on his website just for doing fine art, black and white photography. And he does this really elemental stuff, tree and rock. So this is what happens when you get burned out on writing code, okay? When you just can't do it anymore. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a picture of tree and rock. Now, that's as complicated as I want to get. Anymore, ever. But here's the punchline. So he prints this, he gets the best Epson high-end printer he can, right? And he gets the best black and white inks and all that stuff. He prints it out, and he prints out a really big one. He prints out really big stuff. He takes huge negatives, like foot by 2 foot negatives, some big negative. And he scans it in with this super high resolution thing, and then he wants to print it out on like 3 foot by 6 foot paper. I mean, these things, he prints these things out huge. And they have super resolution, just incredible. And he's looking at it and he goes, this isn't good enough. This printer is horrible. It's, it's putting a grayscale in there where I don't want one. It doesn't have enough degrees of grayscaling. It's doing this anti-aliasing thing or something. I don't know. He starts talking all these pixel words that I didn't quite grasp. So he writes his own printer driver, right? Is that an egghead or what? So he said he wasn't ever going to write any code again. So he sells the driver on his website. Get this, for like $40 or something. So I got to go buy one of them, and then start sending in a bunch of complaints. Like, this driver's lousy, I want my money back. You should do it too. What if 180 people bought one and then complained? That'd be good. You'll know the world loves them. So what did I do wrong? Because a lot of that was, I did a lot of pretty right stuff, if I do say so, but I screwed up a few things. Okay, fine. I probably should have never left, for starters. That's probably one little point to dwell on for a minute. So I did an acquisition. It wasn't working out very well. I was really kind of pooped. I was kind of tired. And I should have just taken a sabbatical, is what I probably really should have done. I should have gone back to basics. The acquisition was to get some office automation software to differentiate myself from Oracle. That was really stupid. Microsoft Office was about to take over the world. It was inevitable. I should have just stuck to the database thing. Who would have known databases would still be like a big deal today? I mean, Microsoft had just done this deal with Sybase. They were about to cover the earth with really cheap databases. I thought sort of the game might be over. Wrong. I could have just stuck to the knitting. MySQL comes out, database products are still coming and growing and getting bought for hundreds of millions of dollars. And who would have thought? So I hired a guy, long story there, but he was sort of he was the right guy in some ways, because he built the company to, 200 million to 400 million to 800 million. But he really built a very different company, a very different culture. And long after I left, so I was never deposed, but he did, sort of do time. A little problem with financial reporting irregularities. He had some issues, but the company did move on, and inevitably IBM did buy the database part for $1 billion, and then bought the other part for $1 billion. So new industry. Enterprise application software. So 1990s, early 90s, it was a new thing. All you really had to do was build an application on top of one of these great databases and put some important solution in a can, sell it, and make it modifiable and scalable, and you'd make a lot of money. So Siebel Systems with Salesforce automation, SAP, manufacturing automation. PeopleSoft started off as human resources and then went into all sorts of back office applications. So Dave Duffield, Tom Siebel, Hasso Plattner. I made some money too, but not nearly as much as those guys. They're all a lot better at it than me. But the way I made the money was I had this one great guy working for me, Steve Goldsworthy, who was the manager of our engineering organization since Roy was sort of the guru. So he wanted to start a company. So he came to me with a whole bunch of business plans. Couldn't figure out which one to do. And we kept going to Burger King and sorting through them for lunch, week after week, and inevitably picked one, and it was customer support. So the notion was, there were a lot of companies like Microsoft, they had an 800 number, what's wrong with Microsoft Word, it's broken, what should I do about it? Compaq, this system won't boot up for nothing, I've been slapping it up around, won't work. So we thought, well, there's a lot of high-tech companies around. We'll build a customer support system. So we did that. And we sold it to some of these companies for their hotline companies, and we'd get, 50 grand deals, and then 100 grand deals, and then 150 grand deals. And I thought, oh boy, we're still losing money, but, this could make it. And then, I swear, at one board meeting, it turned out, this little realization struck me, everyone has customers. It isn't just these little techie companies that we know about. The first $1 million deal was done, it was like a banker, an insurance company or something like that. And as soon as I saw that deal go up on the slideshow during the board meeting from the VP of Sales, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be big. And this is now called a call center. So this was like one of the first applications to automate a call center. And son of a gun, if every big company doesn't have a whole lot of customers and they all have to keep track of all their feedback. So this was the beginning of customer relationship management. Sippl was doing it from the sales side, and Vantive was doing it from the customer support side. It went public in '95. And curiously, just a side note here, because sometimes you think, oh, I have an idea, I'm going to start a company, but oh, there's another company starting up to do the same thing. No, I'll never make it. I swear, this company was the weird thing about it was there was Vantive and Scopus and Clarify and Remedy. They all started up within about a year of each other. They all went public. It was an amazing thing. They all made it. All competing with each other. IPOs are great things. Please, in your lifetime, bring back the IPO. There haven't been a whole lot of them lately. It's up to you guys. You got to do it. Isn't that pretty? You know, I watch poker on TV, and there's this guy who goes, the ace of spades is the prettiest card in the deck. Well, it's not nearly as pretty as a good. How many people have ever, like, held a prospectus? All right, come on now. Like, opened it up, flipped through it. See, not enough of you. The rest of you have got to just go find a prospectus. The next decent to high-tech company that goes public, go get it, at least flip through it, read up a little on the product and what their strategy is, and look at the numbers. What are they selling? What's their growth rate been? This is what we need, more of these. So you guys got to go make these things happen. We bring back the IPO. The joke is I made more money on Vantive as a small investor and a guy who just was on the board. I was actually chairman for a while. Because I didn't need to sell stock right away because I already had my new car and my new house. And it was the 90s. So Vantive was worth a whole lot more as a multiple of its revenue. It was worth, instead of like, 2.5 times revenue, it was worth like 8 times revenue or 12 times revenue. And in subsequent years, during the internet bubble, things, of course, as you know, got worth 100 times revenue or an infinite times revenue. Still don't understand that whole thing, so don't ask me how that happened. I don't understand that. What did I screw up at Vantive? Okay, well, again, it was some CEO issues. Turns out CEO is sort of a big issue, a much bigger issue than I thought it was when I was at Informix. The board's job is to really hire and fire the CEO, and you do a bunch of other stuff. But the number one job is that. And so we had a CEO. Steve founded the company, but we brought in the sales and marketing CEO, because obviously the techie guy can't sell his way out of a paper bag. Well, that was the theory. And indeed, Steve did need help, but we would have been much better off to bring in a really strong VP of marketing or VP of sales or VP of sales marketing or a president or a chief operating officer. Now that I'm older and wiser, there are a lot of other ways we could have done that. We could have skinned that cat a lot of different ways. However, Vantive was doing great. Of course, all boats were floating higher and higher every year. The tide was rising on enterprise software. But you can't, it's hard to fire the CEO when things are going well. That was the same problem with Informix. The CEO I brought in, things were going pretty well. You can't, hard to fire him, even though he's doing things that you wish he wouldn't have been doing in terms of managing the company. If he didn't start cooking the books till after I was long gone, I would have caught him and that would have been it, the end of him. But you know, the culture wasn't going right. But you can't, it's hard for the ex-CEO to fire the new CEO, even though he's doubling revenue and the stock's doubling or tripling every year. I explain that to Wall Street. We fired him because I don't like the culture. You know, that wouldn't have gone so well. So there's, this CEO thing's kind of an important thing. On the other hand, if you're CEO and you really don't know how to sell anything or market your way out of a paper bag, you really have to decide what type of person to bring in to help you run the company, and whether he's going to be CEO or you're going to be CEO, or what the deal is. In venture investing, that's one of the biggest issues, especially when you're investing in companies run by young entrepreneurs. In Vantive's case, Steve True was not the Wall Street ideal or the venture capitalist's ideal of a perfect CEO. Had no sales and marketing experience, was a VP of engineering his whole life. But he had a passion for the product. He had a passion for the marketplace. He had a passion for the company. He built a great company. It had a great culture. I think we'd have been better off to stick with him. Bill Davidow, who was the other guy at Vantive who was on the board, who was the key player, he told me afterwards, And I think he was talking to me more about Informix than he was about Vantive, but I think it holds true for both. He pointed out that, because he came from Intel, David Howe did, and he said, you know, the founders of Intel were still there, and a lot of the other management team, the CEO stayed a long time. Dave and Bill down at Hewlett-Packard stayed there their whole life. So it's a different model from the Silicon Valley serial entrepreneur style, where you start a company, build it up, sell it, move on, start another one. There's merits to both, but hopefully we'll see some, maybe the culture will change a little bit around here, and we'll get some of you guys to build really big companies over decades. It might have been a better life for me. Okay, Visigenic Software. Plan A was we were building a graphical 4GL, which was mistimed. The time had passed. It was a horrible idea. Didn't work out very well. But we did. We were using ODBC, database connectivity, talked to lots of different databases, and that was valuable. So we were selling that. And then this other way of talking to databases via an object in an object server. Application servers didn't exist. So we were trying to figure out what this was. The object management group had this standard called Object Request Broker. So I tried to call it an application management system, sort of named after a database management system, but you know, there's print servers, there's mail servers. It's an application server, you idiot. So anyway, that's the name that finally stuck. It was before Java's J2E, but we had the first Java application server, and we actually took this company public on virtue of this architecture, that we had the first software that allowed Java applications to exist in a middle tier. So a user interface could talk to the customer object, and the customer object went to the database and searched around tables or multiple databases or whatever to find out what the customer was that the guy wanted and return the customer back. So the three-tier architecture using the Java programming language is what got this company public. It really saved the company. All of a sudden we had a hot product, revenue started climbing. The IPO market had gotten even hotter, so now we're talking about the late 90s. Now we're getting close to the bubble. I never really did enjoy the real bubble. But we were getting close enough such that Wall Street, if it had anything to do with a network of any kind, or Java, or both, you could take it public. So we weren't quite profitable, but in the board meeting, since we were taking a company public before we became profitable, this was dubbed the More Balls Than Brains Roadshow. And indeed, about my 6th day roaming around Wall Street trying to get this stock sold, I began to really believe that. So my investment bankers, they really did. They gave me a 6-pack of whips. It was these, it was a 6-pack of Coke, right? But they had these little custom labels made. It just said whip with a lightning bolt and stuff like that. They go, okay, open one of these, chug it, go into this buy-side investor and sell them some stock. So we actually, I think it was the 6-pack of whips that did allow us to get the company public. Who made money on that? Well, Bill Coleman and all those guys at BEA, they jumped on the J2E bandwagon. Now, if I would have been really brilliant, I would have gone back and retooled everything off of the Object Management Group standard to be the J2E standard, which would have been like a total rewrite. We would have had to run like both products in parallel, or it would have been a merged product. We weren't eager to do this. Besides, Sun owned J2E, so we thought, how can we build a big company if they own the standard? But yada, yada. I mean, BEA did it, so we were right there. We should have done it. We screwed up. So we didn't make very much on that at all. We did take the company public. It did get profitable, and we sold it, and we all made money. But we sort of missed the big brass ring. So we sold it too early. We took it public too early, which is why we had to sell it too early. If we had stayed private, we would have been able to do that retooling and then really ramp revenue. We could have been BEA and taken it public, going from 20 million in revenue to 100 million in revenue. And that would have been a lot more fun. But didn't quite get it done that way. Oh, and when we sold it to Borland, the due diligence thing didn't work out. I mean, we did the due diligence. We did everything we were supposed to do. We got lied to, so don't let people lie to you. I mean, if you think someone's lying to you, they probably are. That was a difficult time too. But most of these times are good. I don't want to dwell on the negatives, but I think it would be doing you a disservice if I just told you all the good stuff and didn't tell you everything that's screwed up. So the IPO process, it's exciting. It's very distracting. I mean, if you get a company built up 20 people, 40 people, 100 people, 150 people, oh my God, we're going to go public. I mean, everything just, all normal operations go weird, I mean, people do start working harder and stuff because they want to get it public, but everyone's very distracted by the whole thing. Very nerve-wracking. But there's a lot of good things to it. You get liquidity, so all of a sudden the stock is actually going to be worth something pretty soon, except for, you got to sell it and not get accused of inside trading. You're viable. Your customers stop asking you, can we see your books? They just stop asking because you just published them. You're very proud of them. You went public. You're a big hit. Everyone wants to do business with you. So instead of being worried about doing business with you, they want to do it. It's good. You get notoriety. It's like free advertising. It's great. You can survive in the long term, so in case you do screw up, you still got a lot of money in the bank. You can retool. You can fix things. However, you do subject yourself to the bad quarter syndrome. So before subscription revenue recognition, you would sell something for $1 million and you would book it, and so you'd have a $10 million quarter, and that'd be great. But if then you had a $7 million quarter the next quarter, your stock would go from 18 to 3. And that wasn't any good at all. You'd get all this bad press. People would start expecting layoffs, and you go, we have $50 million in the bank. We just had a bad quarter. What's the big panic? Well, Wall Street doesn't see it that way. I mean, they just tear you apart. All your investors are calling you up, yelling at you. This is going to make me look. Well, I don't care. You just hold the stock forever. We're going to do a lot better next year. Oh, I'm not going to wait until next year. Well, go to hell then. It's just, the whole public thing is just really, it's very different. So, you want to have your whole act really together before you go public. And then there was this guy, Bill Larac. Who's ever heard of Bill Larac? This is way too young for you guys. But this guy, he would sue you. Whenever your stock fell, you had a bad quarter, your stock falls, this guy sues you. Why? There's no reason. It's because Ralph Nader, the Pinto's blowing up. That was before your time too. But Ralph Nader made this class action law so that, one guy can say, hey, I'm pissed, and there's a lot of people that might be like me. And so we're going to sue, instead of for the $1,200 I lost, we're going to sue for the, the guy market cap went from 500 million to 150 million. So there's a $350 million ambulance to chase here. And I'm going to go sue these guys for $350 million on behalf of everybody. Even though they don't really want the company sued, I'm a lawyer and I'm going to do it because Ralph Nader said I could. Okay, so that's Bill Larac. So all he would do is, as soon as your stock fell, he would submit a complaint. He would sue you. And he'd have the wrong company in there. He'd have the wrong people. The CEO's name would be wrong. Because he just off the word processor as soon as possible. Because he wanted to get it in there before all the other lawyers so he could go to the judge and say, I'm lead counsel because I've been on top of this. Swear to God. So now we have Sarbanes-Oxley, the Accountants Full Employment Act. Instead of your audit fees being $500,000 a year, they're like $2 million, just because now we got all these extra regulations and they're just using it as an excuse to charge you a lot more money. So as you go through your lives, could you please undo some of that? Because there really aren't that many corrupt CEOs. Yeah, there are some, like the one I hired. Not to mention my CFO, but that was when we were still private. But there's no need to cripple America's free enterprise. That's Bill Larac on the right. He got to spend the night in the White House. So John Doerr of Kleiner Perkins and myself and about 4 or 5 other guys, we started a fund. Because I got sued like 5 times by this guy. So I'm really getting tired of it. So we started a fund. We lobbied Washington. We got a new law passed that you actually have to have a cause of action before you sue a company, even in a class action suit. So Larac, who raised more money for Clinton than anybody in California, because he represents the plaintiffs' bar in California, he gets to spend the night in the White House. And here he is spending the night in the White House in Clinton's first term. And Clinton vetoed our bill the next day. Swear to God. It was his first veto, and it got overridden by Congress a couple weeks later. It's a true story. That's just how it goes. He sued me for each of those companies. I think he sued me twice on Informix and Vantive, PeopleSoft, and Interwoven. And during that campaign to change the law, he put up a website of likely repeat offenders. And he's got me and a bunch of great people. He's got like Gordon Moore, the guy, Moore's Law. He's got John Doerr. He's got me. He's got all these great people. I go, this is a great website. This is good. I took a snapshot of it. I was proud to be up there with all those people. Likely repeat offenders. Anyway, he's doing time. I think he's still in jail. And just like Al Capone, right? They don't bust him for starting the mafia. They bust, Al Capone for tax evasion, right? They get this clown for. He finally bribed somebody to be a plaintiff, right? He didn't have a plaintiff handy. Some company missed their quarter, and it was a really juicy one. So he goes and finds someone who owns some shares, and he pays the guy to be the designated plaintiff to represent everybody else. And that's illegal. That's the technicality he went downtown on. Good Lord. Anyway, inside trading. So start selling the same number of shares every quarter. So that the Chronicle writes a column. You know, so I do that for like 12 quarters, right? And the stock goes up every time I sell it. You know, the stock goes up the next quarter. So one quarter, I sell the stock and it goes down. And so Herb Greenberg in the Chronicle writes up a whole column. You know, Sippl, insider trading. You know, he sold this stock at 18 and the next quarter was a bad quarter and the stock's now at 12. And he made, you know, 50,000 times $6. He made $300,000 that should be paid back. You know, and so my lawyer. So I'm about to call him. My lawyer comes running in my office as soon as he saw the paper going into my office. He goes, "Do not call him. Don't call him." I go, "Why not? I'm calling this son of a bitch. I'm going to tell him what I think." And let me handle it. I'll handle this. So you know, okay, you got one day. So you know, my lawyer calls him, and the lawyer comes back in my office, and I go, "Well, did you tell him that I've been selling shares, the same number of shares every quarter, no matter whether the stock's up or down?" He goes, "Oh, he knows that." I go, "Well, why did he write that column?" And he goes, "Because it sells papers." I'm going, "Okay, now I know who you're dealing with." And he goes, he said that a guy like Sippl, and a guy like Sippl is damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. So there you go. So when you do succeed, don't expect a whole lot of praise and thanks. I mean, you get a lot of it and stuff, but there'll be these other guys like the Lorax and Herb Greenberg and stuff like that. So going public, entrepreneurial at all. You're doing it for the money, it's actually not quite worth it. You can go to work, get a great job, you're all very bright, high educated. You can make enough money, you can sing in the Christmas choir. You know, it's a lot of fun things you can do in life. Why are you doing it? And I'll tell you why. You do it for the Lucite. Now, if you guys, you haven't read any prospectuses, so you probably don't know what the Lucite is either, but it's this sort of stuff. You know what I mean? Okay? Yeah, so when you go public, you get a little, the underwriter gives you one of these babies. That's Visigenic. That's a good one. This one I shouldn't have pulled out. That was actually for a party I threw. The party was so good, my underwriter made Lucite to celebrate the party. That's another Visigenic. That's a double. Later on, only some investment bankers did this, but then you have two investment bankers usually, and then sometimes you get doubles. You know, you get one from each investment banker because they decided that was Vantive. That was good. And this is cute. This has a little prospectus in it, inside it. And that's because the Informix one did. And so the other investment banker on the Vantive deal, after he heard me bragging about how much I liked the Informix one, they weren't going to be outdone. Here was the first one. This is the mother of all Lucites. So this is the Informix IPO. And it's the whole prospectus right in there. Anyway, that's why you're doing it, for the Lucite. Questions, anybody?
You mentioned that for a couple of years you couldn't get any VC money, so I'm just wondering whether you had a survival strategy during that time, and if you did, what was that strategy?
Well, you saw part of it. You know, the pumpkin pie was key, and the trip to Vegas and putting payroll on the Visa. But really, it was just work really hard and find something to sell. So we were working on a whole database management system, but actually, I realized that the C programming language had no ISAM. It had no way of reading and writing index records at all. So we took the retrieval method that we'd already finished, and we declared it a product. We called it CISAM, and it became an international standard. And we sold it very cheaply, so it was much easier for people to send us money in the mail. Much shorter decision cycle, so instead of a 6-month evaluation, people would just say, "Oh, finally, C's got an ISAM. Thank God, I know exactly what that is. That's what I want. I'll take it." And so we found smaller products to sell and found other channels that cycled cash more quickly.
So you said that one of your regrets was that like you would get out of the company too early or do something or miss some change.
Yeah.
So now that what's some advice you would give for us to be more aware of changes in the business environment as they happen, so we can maybe react more swiftly?
Oh boy, business environment. I'm not sure a lot of it, you know, some of the things were business environment, but some of the things was just personal paranoias or, you know. I'd get advice. I think if I would have gotten advice from a broader audience of people, and if I'd have listened a little harder to some of the people that were a little older and wiser and had maybe been through, maybe they had been through the same bumps I had, maybe not even the same industry. You know, there was this organization, Young Presidents Organization, that I always thought was a bunch of guys just going off on golf trips and stuff, and I didn't really want to do that. I had work to do. So I don't know if I would have done that exactly, but I think those guys all gained something from each other. They had a peer group that they could talk over issues with, and they could discover, well, everyone's worried about that, but the way this guy deals with it is he just sold more stock and put more cash on the balance sheet and decided to stop worrying about it and told all his investors, you know, we're doing this project. It could screw things up for a year. So hang tight. If you don't like it, sell. Don't call me. Don't bother me. This is what we're going to do. And so, you know, I think they sort of shared ideas with each other. And having a business advisor that's older and wiser, putting guys on your board that have been through different industries and different markets. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's kind of all the same. I mean, like I said, I've done a few medical deals now, and, you know, it's kind of all the same stuff. It really sort of is. I wouldn't have believed that when I was in college, but it is. Maybe one last question? A lawyer is a good place to get advice. So if you get a great lawyer, not just your average run-of-the-mill lawyer, but a lawyer kind of like in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas lawyer. One more question? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could just comment on kind of the state of the VC industry right now.
Right now, it is terrible. So glad you asked. I think during the bubble, far too much money was invested by the California Teachers Association pension plan and stuff like that, you know, organizations like that, and there's thousands of them, and they have $1 billion or $10 billion apiece under management, and they'll put like 40% of it in equities and 40% of it in bonds and then 20% in other stuff, and part of that will be in venture capital firms, right? So when Netscape went public and, you know, Yahoo and these guys started allocating lots more of these, literally in total trillions of dollars, to the venture community to try to get these 10x returns instead of 4% returns. So they're really, on the average, a venture fund will return maybe 15 or 18% per annum in a good year if you write off all the losses and take the winners. So anyway, a lot of money got allocated to the venture industry. Those guys invested in a lot of companies, and a lot of things did not work out. And, you know, now we got the recession. A lot of those firms have to go away. A lot of those partners have to not be in the business anymore. They have to have a lot less money to invest. They have to start doing more quality investments. In the interim, we're all going to suffer. So it's harder to get that early stage money for two dynamics. One is that they've got all these other companies they've put 5, 10, 20 million into, and they have to try to get some decent resolution for them, so they're all focused on that. The other problem is the funds are all too big. They've got 300 million under management, so they're going to give you $250,000. Well, we can't dedicate a partner. We only got 6 partners. How can we put a partner on a $250,000 investment? So unfortunately, it puts a lot of pressure on the angel community, guys like me, and we've been getting tapped out. So it's tough right now. It's probably as hard as it was when I was trying to get Informix funded. But on the other hand, it is a lot bigger. It's probably tenfold the size it was in the early 80s. So when things do turn around a little bit, I think money will become a lot more available. Maybe not next year, it'll get a little better. The year after that, I think it'll get better. But it'll be shrinking while it's getting more available. It'll be a curious thing, but that's how it'll go. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.